What about Ukraine's incursion into Russia, Elbridge? What can you tell us about that?
Well, look, I think everybody's been pretty astounded and impressed by the Ukrainian move. I do think there are questions about what exactly the Ukrainians are trying to achieve. They've advanced into Russian territory. But, you know, the main sort of thrust of the conflict is in Ukraine's east, where the Russians continue to make progress. Perhaps Kiev is trying to sort of switch the narrative or pull Russian forces away. But it's not clear how that's going to work. And I mean, that's what the Journal was saying today, that even some Ukrainian forces in the east were saying, hey, you know, what about reinforcements here? So we'll have to see how it plays out. The Ukrainians have certainly, I think, impressed and included. And I think the Kremlin's kind of been knocked on its back foot a bit. But I don't see this as fundamentally changing the trajectory of the war.
Can you sort of prognosticate how you think this election here in the United States could impact all of what we're talking about?
Well, look, I think it's a huge question, Andrew. And I mean, to me, it's got to be one of the key factors in the election for Americans is looking out at the world. It's an exceptionally dangerous time. Not only the places you mentioned, but the Korean Peninsula and, of course, the Chinese are still preparing for a conflict. And moreover, there's a deep structural tension at the economic level where you see basically the Chinese continuing to focus on an export-led, industrial production model, and the rest of the world worrying about another China shock. That's a deep, very serious source of tension. Look, I'm biased. I support President Trump, but I think the current trajectory that we're on is not a good one. I mean, there's a lot of the rhetoric that people hear, which is, the rules-based international order and so forth. But what you really see is a yawning gap between our capabilities and our pledges. I mean, the carrier I mentioned, for instance, I believe there's no carrier in the Pacific right now. And the AP is reporting that the U.S. is behind on pretty much all of our naval programs. So, we're talking big, but we're not really following up. I think what we need is a fundamental reindustrialization, particularly of our defense industrial base, so we can produce for ourselves and for our allies like Israel and ideally Ukraine, Japan, et cetera, Taiwan, et cetera, but also a strong military that we use sparingly. I think that's the kind of a model we need, and I think we need a fundamental change because we're headed to a pretty bad place right now.